In the heart of Texas lies a small town, the kind of place where everyone knows each other's name, where neighbors wave from their porches, and the rhythm of life feels almost timeless. A town built on faith, family, and the comforting illusion that nothing truly terrible could ever happen here. But beneath its quiet streets, darkness waited. It moved silently, unnoticed, hiding behind ordinary smiles. And for Anggy Diaz, a woman known for her warmth and kindness, that darkness lived closer than anyone could imagine. Anggy was only 30, bright, ambitious, a woman who laughed often and loved deeply. Friends described her as the kind of person who could turn a bad day around with a few kind words. She worked hard, dreamed of building a future, and believed in love, even when love began to turn against her. Her husband, Jared James Diaz, was known in town as polite but withdrawn. To neighbors, they looked like an ordinary couple: grocery trips, Sunday church, polite smiles. Yet behind closed doors, the walls of their home absorbed the echoes of something darker: control, tension, fear. At first, the signs were subtle. Anggy's friends noticed changes: a nervous laugh, missed calls, quiet hesitation when his name came up. She once confided that Jared's temper frightened her. He could shift from calm to cold in an instant. "He's not always like that," she'd said softly, as if convincing herself. By the fall of 2023, the tension had grown unbearable. Those closest to her later said that she had begun to pull away, searching for strength to make a change. A silent battle too many women fight alone. On October 14th, the sun rose over the peaceful streets of Waller County. Children went to school, coffee brewed in kitchen corners, and Anggy headed to work with that same faint smile she always wore. No one knew it would be her last morning alive. That evening, something inside the Diaz home snapped. What began as another argument spiraled into horror. Jared's anger, long suppressed and festering, erupted in violence so extreme that even veteran detectives struggled to describe what they found. When police were called to the residence after relatives reported not hearing from Anggy, they expected a welfare check. Instead, they uncovered a nightmare. The small, neat home reeked of bleach and chemical cleaners. The furniture had been moved. Blood traces lined the floor and walls. And then, the truth, a discovery so horrific it silenced the entire department. Anggy Diaz had been decapitated by her husband. The crime wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, methodical. Jared had not only killed his wife, he'd tried to erase her, to scrub her existence from the physical world. Forensic teams documented every inch of the scene, uncovering evidence of cleanup attempts, smears of blood, and fibers linking him directly to the act. When the news broke, the small Texas town convulsed in disbelief. How could the quiet young man next door commit something so monstrous? Churches held vigils, neighbors wept, and yet the question lingered in every whisper. What kind of rage drives a man to destroy the woman he once vowed to love? Detectives quickly pieced together a chilling timeline. The couple had argued earlier that day. Financial troubles, jealousy, and Jared's growing paranoia. He accused her of betrayal. She tried to calm him, but by nightfall, rage eclipsed reason.
The following morning, Jared was found wandering near the home, calm, detached, muttering fragments of confession. When taken into custody, he reportedly told officers, "I did something bad. She's gone." Inside the interrogation room, he sat quietly, emotionless, as detectives asked why. His response chilled them. "I loved her too much."
It was the kind of love that kills. A love twisted by control and obsession, where affection turns to ownership and devotion becomes destruction. In the days that followed, investigators worked tirelessly. Forensic experts analyzed the chemical residues Jared had used in his futile attempt to erase the evidence. Every surface told a story, of struggle, of fear, of finality. Anggy's last moments were reconstructed in fragments of blood patterns and digital messages. Text exchanges from days before revealed her unease. She'd written to a friend, "I don't feel safe. He's getting worse." But she stayed, perhaps hoping he would change, perhaps afraid of what leaving might mean.
When the medical examiner released her autopsy results, the community fell silent. The brutality of the act shattered even seasoned officers. Sheriff Troy Guidry described it simply: "It's the worst thing I've seen in my career."
The investigation's details painted a picture of obsession. Jared's online activity showed searches about anger, jealousy, and control. His journal entries revealed growing resentment, fantasies of cleansing and starting over. To him, the line between love and possession had vanished long before that October night. Anggy's friends, unable to comprehend the cruelty, clung to her memory, her laughter, her kindness, her humanity. To them, she was more than a victim. She was a light extinguished by a man's darkness. In the span of a single night, the illusion of safety in their quiet Texas town was shattered forever. The morning after the murder, the stillness of Waller County shattered beneath the pulse of sirens. Police cars lined the narrow street, their flashing lights painting red and blue across the white fences and the oak trees that framed the Dicus home. Neighbors peeked through curtains, their hearts pounding, unable to reconcile what they were seeing with the quiet man who'd mowed his lawn just days before. Inside, the smell hit first: bleach, blood, and something metallic that clung to the back of the throat. The house was eerily quiet, but it spoke in evidence. Overturned furniture, faint drag marks, and small stubborn stains that no amount of scrubbing could erase. Detective Laura Simmons, the lead investigator, stood at the doorway and took a slow breath.
"You walk into that kind of scene," she said later, "and you feel it. Evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers."
Forensics moved carefully, collecting fibers, swabbing surfaces, photographing every inch. They found gloves under the sink, half-used bottles of cleaning solution, and a pile of rags still damp from an attempted cleanup. What struck them most was the precision. Jared hadn't acted blindly. Every trace of violence was followed by an attempt to control it. Anggy's phone sat abandoned on the kitchen counter. Her last text message, never sent, was addressed to a friend. "We argued again. I think he's angry. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Tomorrow would never come. By midday, the police had begun piecing together the timeline. Neighbors reported hearing shouting late at night. A woman's voice, desperate, followed by a thud that silenced everything. One neighbor, an elderly man who lived across the street, said he saw Jared pacing in the driveway around midnight, his shirt stained, his eyes vacant. When officers found Jared the next morning, he was walking along a rural road barefoot, muttering to himself. He didn't resist arrest. When Detective Simmons asked what happened, he simply said,
"It's done. She's gone."
Inside the interrogation room, the man who had once smiled politely at church sat in silence, hands folded, eyes unfocused. His calmness was unsettling. There was no anger, no regret, just detachment.
"Jared, can you tell us what happened last night?" "She wouldn't listen," he said. "I loved her too much."
As hours passed, pieces of the truth began to emerge. Jared had grown increasingly paranoid in the weeks before the murder. He accused Anggy of cheating, of planning to leave, of betraying him. He controlled her phone, her messages, even her social media. Friends had noticed his behavior, checking on her constantly, calling her during work hours, waiting outside her job. When she tried to assert independence, he saw it as rejection. And rejection, to Jared, was an unforgivable sin. Forensic analysis confirmed what detectives already suspected. The crime had been deliberate. Blood spatter on the walls revealed the trajectory of violence. Patterns showed there had been a struggle. Anggy had tried to fight back. Chemical residue traced where Jared had scrubbed the floor, while a faint trail of footprints led from the living room to the bathroom, then out to the backyard. It was there, in the backyard, that officers found the tool used in the decapitation, hidden beneath a tarp, its handle wiped, but not clean. Even without fingerprints, the evidence was overwhelming.
The next step was to understand why. Behavioral experts were brought in to profile Jared. They described a man with obsessive tendencies, narcissistic control, and deep emotional dependency. To men like Jared, one psychologist explained, love isn't partnership, it's possession. The thought of losing control feels like death. and in their minds, killing becomes a way to reclaim power.
Meanwhile, Anggy's friends and co-workers were called in for questioning. They painted a heartbreaking portrait. A woman trying to maintain peace, constantly making excuses for her husband's anger. One co-worker remembered her saying, "He's just stressed, he'll calm down." But he never did.
As the investigation deepened, the town's disbelief turned to horror. People who had shared barbecues and church pews with Jared found themselves replaying every memory, every smile, every word. "You think you know people?" one neighbor said through tears. "But you don't know what happens when the doors close?"
At the police station, the evidence continued to pile up. Jared's internet searches, his messages, his financial records. Days before the murder, he had withdrawn cash, purchased cleaning supplies, and deleted browser history. It wasn't madness in the moment. It was premeditation.
When confronted with this evidence, Jared simply shrugged. "I just wanted peace," he said again.
Detective Simmons slammed her pen onto the table. "Peace? You butchered her." He looked up at her, almost confused. "I couldn't let her go."
That line became the heart of the prosecution's case. Not just a confession, but an insight into motive. It revealed obsession, not insanity. Control, not chaos. Within days, prosecutors charged Jared James Dicas with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. His mugshot, blank eyes, unkempt hair, no trace of remorse, spread across the internet like wildfire. The small Texas town, once invisible to the world, was now the center of a national tragedy. Reporters flooded in. Satellite vans filled the streets. Every network wanted the story of the husband who decapitated his wife in their suburban home. But for those who lived there, it wasn't a headline. It was a wound.
In candlelight vigils, Anggy's name was whispered through tears. Her family, shattered but dignified, thanked the community for their support. "She was love," her mother said softly. "Pure love. That's how we will remember her."
As detectives finalized their report, the last piece of evidence was logged. A small silver locket found in Anggy's hand, its chain broken. Inside was a photo of the two of them, smiling, back when love still looked real. That locket became the symbol of the case. Of love twisted into horror, of trust betrayed, of how darkness can live inside the most ordinary home. And as the Dicas house stood empty, police tape fluttering in the Texas wind, one question lingered like a ghost in the silence. How does love turn into something this cruel? The courthouse in Waller County was never built for this kind of attention. On the morning of Jared James Dicas's trial, news vans lined the block. Reporters whispered rehearsed lines into cameras, and dozens of locals gathered on the courthouse lawn holding candles and photos of Anggy Diaz. Inside, the air was thick, part grief, part anticipation. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and tension. At the front sat Jared, dressed in a plain gray jumpsuit, wrists shackled, eyes empty. He didn't look at anyone. Not the reporters, not the jury, not even at the family of the woman he'd destroyed. Across from him, Anggy's family sat close together, hands intertwined. Her mother clutched a small rosary and the silver locket that once belonged to her daughter. The same locket police had found in Anggy's hand the night of the murder. The judge entered. The room fell silent. The trial that would decide Jared's fate had begun.
The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Ellen Cruz, opened with words that sliced through the quiet. "This was not love," she said. "This was control, obsession. A man's belief that if he couldn't have her, no one could."
The defense tried to paint a different picture, that Jared was emotionally unstable, consumed by paranoia and mental illness. His attorney argued that he'd suffered a psychotic break, that he had lost himself in delusion. But the prosecution was ready. They'd spent months assembling the pieces, the text messages, the surveillance footage, the chemical evidence, the forensic reports. What emerged wasn't insanity. It was intention.
Detectives took the stand first, recounting what they found in the house. Photos of the crime scene were projected onto the courtroom wall. Blood patterns, broken glass, the faint trace of a handprint on a white cabinet. The jury flinched. Some looked away. "He didn't lose control," she said. "He made a choice. every action that night was deliberate.
The forensic analyst followed, explaining how Jared had attempted to erase evidence, wiping surfaces, using industrial cleaners, even pouring bleach over specific areas of the floor. But trace DNA remained. "It's impossible to fully erase a story," the analyst said. "Blood remembers."
Then came the digital forensics team. They revealed Jared's online searches from the week before the murder. How to remove DNA evidence. How long does blood last on concrete? Signs she's cheating. What happens if you kill someone you love? The courtroom gasped. One juror covered her mouth. The defense shifted uncomfortably, but the damage was done. When the prosecution played the interrogation video, the atmosphere grew unbearable. Jared sat calmly in that cold, fluorescent-lit room, his voice low and eerily steady. "I just wanted peace. She was making me crazy. I loved her too much." It wasn't the words, it was the tone, detached, cold. A man describing not a crime, but a solution. The prosecution ended their segment with a simple statement. This was not passion. This was punishment.
The defense began its counterattack, focusing on Jared's mental state. They brought in psychologists who described his depression, anxiety, and dependence on alcohol. They painted him as fragile, lost, and desperate, a man spiraling out of control.
They argued that Jared had experienced a dissociative break, that he had no memory of the act, that he was trapped in an emotional blackout fueled by fear of abandonment. If this was an emotional blackout, why did he clean up the scene? Why did he search online for ways to erase DNA? The psychologist hesitated, shifting in his seat. "That suggests awareness," he admitted.
The turning point came when Anggy's family took the stand. Her mother spoke softly, through tears, describing Anggy's childhood, her laughter, her love for life. She believed in people, she said, even when they didn't deserve it. Her sister recalled the last conversation they had, a phone call 2 days before the murder. "She told me she was scared," she whispered. "I told her to come home. She said she couldn't, that he'd get angry."
Then came the testimony of a co-worker who revealed Anggy had confided about Jared's possessiveness. "She said he watched her every move," the co-worker said. "She didn't call it abuse, but we all saw it."
As he took the stand, all eyes turned to him. His hands trembled slightly, but his face remained blank. "Do you remember what you did to your wife?" the prosecutor asked. A long pause. Then, "Yes." "Why?" "Because she wouldn't stop," he said. "Stop what?" "Hurting me." "Hurting you? How?" He looked at the prosecutor, then at the jury. "She wanted to leave. She was leaving me behind." Silence. The prosecutor stepped closer. "So you decided if you couldn't have her, no one could?" He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. Finally, the prosecutor turned away. No further questions.
When closing arguments began, the atmosphere was electric. The defense pleaded for mercy, citing trauma, confusion, remorse. But Jared had shown none. His stillness, his emptiness, had destroyed that argument before it began. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not about insanity. It's about control. It's about a man who believed love gave him ownership of another human being. He didn't snap. He planned. He didn't lose his mind. He lost his humanity. And tonight, a family sleeps without their daughter because of that.
When the jury returned, every person in the room felt the weight of what was coming. The foreman stood, hands trembling slightly. "We find the defendant, Jared James Dicus, guilty of first-degree murder." A cry broke from Anggy's family, relief mixed with agony. Jared sat motionless, eyes forward, as the judge read the sentence: life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole.
Outside, the crowd gathered as dusk fell. Candles flickered, prayers rose, and somewhere in that warm Texas wind, the name Anggy Diaz was whispered like a vow never to forget. When the gavel struck for the last time, the sound seemed to echo far beyond the courthouse walls, through the streets, through the fields, and into the hearts of everyone who had followed the story of Anggy Diaz. Justice had been served, but it felt hollow. Because justice, as Anggy's mother later said, doesn't bring back the laughter that filled our house. Outside the courthouse, the crowd stood in silence as the family emerged, holding one another tightly. The cameras flashed like lightning. Journalists shouted questions. "Do you feel justice was done?" But no one answered. Grief has no soundbite. That night, every news network across the country led with the same headline: "Husband sentenced to life for decapitating wife." The nation recoiled at the brutality, at the cold precision of it all. But amid the horror, another story began to rise. One about love, about resilience, about the haunting question of how evil can hide in plain sight. In the days that followed, the town began to transform. Candlelight vigils lined the sidewalks. At the local park, a group of mothers gathered, holding photos of their daughters. They cried together, strangers united by fear. The fear that what happened to Anggy could happen to anyone.
At Anggy's workplace, her colleagues created a small memorial. Her desk remained untouched, a cup still half full of coffee, a calendar frozen on October 14th, and a note in her handwriting that read, "Don't forget to smile." Her co-worker Maria stood by that desk during a local news interview. Her voice shook as she said, "She was light. That's the only way to describe her. You didn't just meet Anggy, you felt her."
Across social media, the case spread like wildfire. True crime forums, YouTube channels, podcasts, everyone was talking about Anggy Diaz. But her family didn't want her remembered as a headline. They wanted her remembered as human. They launched the Anggy Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping victims of domestic abuse and supporting women in controlling relationships. The foundation's slogan was simple but powerful: "Love should never hurt." Within weeks, donations poured in. Survivors from across the country reached out to share their stories of manipulation, fear, and survival. Many credited Anggy's tragedy for giving them the courage to seek help. For the first time, something good began to grow from the ashes of horror. Meanwhile, Jared James Dicus was transferred to a maximum security facility in Huntsville, Texas. There, surrounded by concrete and razor wire, he lived in the silence he once imposed on others. Inmates described him as distant, neither violent nor remorseful. He spent hours writing in a small notebook, though no one knew what he wrote. One guard later said, "He looked like a man already gone, just waiting for his body to catch up." When journalists requested interviews, Jared refused them all. The only statement he ever released came through his attorney. "I loved her. I made a mistake I can never undo." But no one bought it. Not after what he'd done.
The prosecutors, the detectives, and even members of the community spoke openly about the case in later documentaries. They described it as the most chilling example of control turning into violence they had ever seen.
Detective Simmons, who led the investigation, appeared in one interview years later. Her voice cracked slightly when she said, "What still haunts me isn't the scene or the evidence. It's knowing she probably saw it coming. That look of recognition when love turns to fear."
Months after the trial, a mural appeared downtown. It showed Anggy surrounded by sunflowers, her favorite flower, painted in vibrant yellow against a dark crimson background. Beneath it, in white lettering, were the words, "Her light will never fade." Every evening people came to the mural. Some brought flowers, others candles. A few simply stood in silence, letting the image speak for them. Anggy's mother visited often. She would sit quietly, whispering prayers in Spanish, her fingers tracing the painted outline of her daughter's face. "Mija," she would say softly, "your story changed more lives than you ever knew."
Across the country, her story became a rallying cry for awareness. Television documentaries, podcasts, and crime channels retold her tragedy, not just for shock, but for change. Advocacy groups used her case to educate about domestic control and early warning signs. Experts pointed to the cycle of silence that allows abuse to escalate unnoticed, the subtle changes in behavior, the isolation, the excuses. One therapist, speaking on national TV, said, "Anggy's story is the story of thousands. It's a story of love weaponized, and we can't look away anymore." Her name joined a growing list of women lost to domestic homicide, but it also became a symbol of courage, of awareness, of the fight to protect others.
2 years later, the Dykus home still stood, but no one wanted to live there. The grass grew tall, the paint peeled, and the air around it felt heavy. Locals avoided walking past after sunset. Some swore they saw lights flicker inside when the house was empty.
But across town, near the church where Anggy once volunteered, a small garden was built in her memory. Roses, lilies, and sunflowers bloomed beneath a sign that read, "In loving memory of Anggy Diaz, forever our light." Every spring, the community gathers there. They plant new flowers, share her story, and pray for those still trapped in the shadows of abusive love. At the end of each vigil, her mother stands before the crowd and says the same words. Words that now define Anggy's legacy. Love does not control. Love does not hurt. Love lets you live.
Years have passed, but the story of Anggy Diaz still echoes. Not just in Waller County, but in every community that's ever believed evil couldn't live next door. Her face adorns posters, murals, and social campaigns. Her voice, preserved through home videos, still laughs through speakers at memorials, a haunting reminder that behind every true crime headline was once a beating heart. As one journalist put it, Anggy's death didn't just expose a killer, it exposed the illusion of safety and the cost of silence. And somewhere, in that quiet Texas town, as the sun dips below the horizon and the cicadas hum their evening chorus, a candle still burns in the window of a small house, flickering softly against the darkness. Because in the end, Anggy Diaz became more than a victim. She became a lesson, a voice for the voiceless, a light that even death couldn't extinguish.